Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love, Shamika Michelle, and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-hosts Shamika Michelle and Wilfred Riley. And our guest this week is Jay Richards. He is the director of the Richard and Helen DeVos Center for Life, Religion, and Family and the William E. Simon Senior Research Fellow in Religious Liberty and Civil Society at the Heritage Foundation. Jay, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you. That is a very long title. Sometime at the end of the interview, we're going to talk about what that actually means and what you mean. But
that's not my fault. They want the whole thing on the bio, though. So.
They want to make sure they include everything you do, and I'm sure it's all important. And like I said, we'll discuss some of that. But the topic that you are coming on to enlighten us and the viewers and listeners on is gender ideology.
Yep.
And I know that could take several lanes. It's a very unfortunately growing and ever-changing every day. What that means changes. So let's start at the point we are now. So talk about what you are researching and discussing and what you see as the issue surrounding gender ideology.
Well, so the stage that we're at now with gender ideology, let's call it the medicalization stage. So this is not the stage in which they're teaching what is really kind of, think of it as a branch of critical theory in teachers, colleges, and in law schools. That would have been 25, 30 years ago. We're at the stage where this has now been applied to pediatric gender medicine. So the way in which kids who suffer from something called gender dysphoria are treated. So kids who feel a discordance with their biological sex, always been kids like this, almost historically it was young boys, very rare condition. They usually grew out of it by the time they got through puberty. Well, now there's a massive flood of kids with this condition and sort of surrounding conditions, plus this desire to respond to this and to treat this medically. Not by helping a child adjust his or her distorted thinking to his biological reality, which is what you would think you would do, right, in any other circumstance. But no, not when it comes to the gender question. Gender affirming care is defined by adjusting language and social surroundings and hormones and a child's body to conform to his or her, quote, gender identity. So that is the stage of gender ideology where we are. I also think it's a crucial stage because for a long time, ordinary observers didn't realize just how radical this ideology was. They might have thought, okay, well, there's kids that are gender nonconforming and maybe are uncomfortable. We should be nice to them, and that's kind of what people were imagining. That's not where we are. And I think in some ways, as ghoulish as it is, this is a cultural opportunity for us to realize just how crazy and radical this ideology is and to actually do something about it. When we were just talking about this in the realm of ideas, I think it didn't really, concern people. But I can say once the ideologues start going after children and going after their minds and their bodies and come between parents and kids, it's a different game. And that's why I think this is as huge as it is a public issue. I also, honestly, I'm optimistic that the ideologues, at least in this particular battle, are going to lose. And so that's the kind of manifestation of it. I haven't defined gender ideology, but that kind of gives you a sense of what's happening.
Well, yeah, that's true. I hope that you're right at the end. I mean, of course, the way it looks now, it doesn't look like it, but I mean, no. Obviously because things are moving so fast, and I want to start with that. Shamika, Will, I always go to Will first. Shamika, so what are your thoughts on, so he gave us a pretty good synopsis of what we're facing right now, but he talked mostly there about, pediatric care. So we've talked to a lot of people. We've talked to, transgender people, we will be talking soon to someone who's detransitioning. It runs the gamut, but we haven't really delved into the medical part of this. So I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, maybe it's just me as an observer, because obviously Jay is in this, but what it looks like how fast it seems to you, Shamika, that we went from, okay, there are some people who have this condition. Some people mistreat them. We should treat them more kindly, right? Like he mentioned, we just wanted to be nice to them. And we started to notice that, wow, it's more, it's Will's reported on the numbers, how the percentages have increased just, exponentially in just 1 year, went from this amount to this amount. And we're talking about how many people identify as such, to instantly you woke up one day and it was surgery and puberty blockers and all that. So just, not just obviously about how extreme it seems, and we'll get to how I think most people still don't realize how deep this is going, but just how quickly it feels to you that it went from just, being able to live my truth to having surgery on children.
Yeah, I don't know what's considered quickly. I do know that I did a video in 2016 complaining about them asking children how they wanted to be identified, and people thought I was nuts.
Right.
And then I remember, I think it was 2018, saying, they're teaching little boys that they can have periods. I think maybe the quick part is how apparent it's become. Like now there's actually a plethora of videos or articles that I can pull from to back me up. Whereas before, I feel like when I used to say it, people just thought I was, being crazy, right, or, reaching, I don't know. So I think now it's just like, okay, there's just so much going on that now I can actually offer evidence where I couldn't before. And so I think that's the quick part for me, because just, 7 years ago or so, I couldn't do that. And but I knew it was happening. And I think that we ignored it for a while. We didn't think it was going to maybe get to this point. Like you said, we just tried to be nice, or I didn't. But I think that, people just tried to be nice and think, oh, well, it's not going to come to my front door. And now it's at your front door. They passed a few months ago here in the public school system that these kids can identify as whatever they like. They can go to school and be called something else other than what's on the birth certificate. And I don't think people here thought it was that close, because there are people that follow me that still thought it was a joke until after the school board passed it. And now they're like, oh, I'm scared. I still have young kids. And I'm like, that's what I've been trying to tell you, lady, y'all weren't listening. And so, I just think we or people ignored it and didn't think it would actually hit home. And now that it's hitting home, people are wanting to wake up, but we're so far along, it's going to be harder to kind of get back to some type of normalcy.
Well, I want to say something real quick to it depends on what I mean by fast, and then Will's going to say the intelligent piece. But it's all relative. So you're right. 5-6 years ago, you were talking about it. Other people, there were whispers and things of that nature. So it's still kind of fast, but you might be like, hey, it's been around a while. But think about the human, we who push back against this talk about it being, the natural order and human nature and what biology says. So if you think of that, now you're talking about the existence of man and woman, and the traditions and the norms and the way people acted about stuff. Being gay is not new. Having certain beliefs is not new, but the way we reacted to it seemed to overnight be a dramatic change. Where you're saying now you have parents saying, look, openly, proudly saying, look, I'm going to raise my kid as a child. Or what was the thing they did a couple of years ago? Having babies, because who are we to say? So it's not even that people are identifying and how you react to that identification. It's us saying, we went from that. Okay, here's one, Shamika. We went from that saying, why would you attack somebody for identifying as something else?
Right. And these kids.
We went from that to, well, I'm not going to assume that my boy is really a boy. So I'm just going to wait and let him decide what he really is when he gets older. That happened, obviously a little bit, there was a little time, but it felt like it was like overnight. Like you went to bed And people were like, let's be kind to LGBTQ. And you woke up, it was LGBTQ plus AIIPP, whatever. And
Right.
it was you, how dare you assume your baby is whatever sex. So from a speed standpoint, in human nature, right?
Yeah.
It's like norm for thousands of years, 3 years, bam. So whether it was 6 months, 3 years, or 5 years, it still was incredibly quick, and it's evolving every day. Will?
Yeah, I mean, to me, gender ideology is one of the craziest things that I've ever seen in terms of how society is reacting to this. I mean, I may be on this issue the least conservative member of the panel if you're just talking about gay people in general. Like, I don't have a problem with gay people at all, but the basic gender idea is existentially nuts. The idea of gender is essentially that the secondary sex characteristics, I think Jay would agree with this, that people have. Like, if I mean, most of us played sports. If you like sports, you're a man. The secondary sex characteristics that people have make up an independent thing that's somehow distinct from sex and that's more important. That's basically the gender idea. So, I mean, you actually see things like the gender unicorn or the G.I. Joe to Barbie scale being taught in the schools, where you'll see it going from a pink doll to a blue doll. And people will be giving these instructions like, if you enjoy the color pink and you're a competent fighter and you like this type of toy or whatever. I mean, I kind of mix those up, but then you're a girl or whatever. I mean, and that is just not real. And it's interesting that this is a contradiction not only in terms of how we as sort of people on the right or the center look at sex. Like, this is something that comes either from science or God. This just is what it is. But it's also completely opposed to how feminists have traditionally looked at sex and sexuality, which is that you're a woman because you have bluntly a vagina. And as a woman, you can do anything. You can be a tough woman. You can be a female fighter pilot. You can be a WNBA player. So you're almost going back to sort of these 1950s norms, but in a weird way, where it's kind of like this meme. Like in the 1950s, a woman baked cookies and a man went hunting. And in the 1990s, either a man or a woman could bake cookies or go hunting. And now in the 2020s, if you bake cookies, male or female, you're a woman. That's what gender ideology boils down to. It's not especially complicated.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's just the idea that these secondary sex traits make up something special. But what they've done, and this is because, in my opinion, of the influence of a lot of mental health problems like autogynephilia on this movement, what they've done is mix this very simple, incorrect idea with all of these ideas about actual physical change. So if the concept was just you have the gender male and the biological sex female, we would think that's weird. The gender concept would just be irrelevant bullshit. Who cares? But you wouldn't necessarily have to do anything related to that. But the idea seems to be, if you have the gender concept male and the biological sex female, you need to change your biological sex as much as possible. So you need to sew on an artificial penis, you need to remove your breasts, so on. You need to make your body look as much as possible like the sex that you're trying to imitate. And there may be a very few people who have actual medical gender dysphoria who would be made healthier by that. Although, I mean, I think there are a lot of psychologists in Scandinavia, or for that matter, in China and India and Russia and Arabia and so on, that would totally disagree with that. But we're seeing now a 10,000% increase in the number of people that are saying they have this sort of cross-gender, cross-sex identification. And the same kind of treatment that was prescribed to the most damaged people 20 or 30 years ago is now being suggested for them. So there are these lineups of hundreds of thousands of kids that are being pushed forward almost into this medical machine, where the idea is you're going to take these puberty blockers, then we're going to probably put you on these hormones. This is the kind of stuff that you couldn't take as a high school athlete or your career was over. This is pure testosterone. This is serious stuff.
Oh, and very serious stuff.
Yeah, and then we're going to start chopping up your body. Like at 16 or 17 in most states, we can perform a voluntary double mastectomy. We don't even need to exaggerate the ages. 14 or 16 is crazy. You can't get a tattoo, but you can remove both of your breasts. So my guess about this, and it's an educated guess, would be that 10 or 20 years down the road, you're going to see tens of thousands of these sort of broken kids, like a much more severe aftermath than we've seen even from the drug scene during my rave era, the punk scene, anything like that, that are going to show the effects of this stuff, that will never recover their voice, for example, because they've taken pure tea for a year. And the first harbinger of this, last point for me, is something that reminds me of what I saw when I first started writing hate crime hoax. And I noticed that there were these lists of thousands of these fake incidents online that were being ignored by kind of mainstream social science. There's a Reddit forum, r/dtrans, where you have to say that you have detransitioned and describe it. I don't see a lot of male bros doing this as a prank to join this forum. And the forum has 42,000 members right now. Like, you have to say, I've gone to hormones or beyond, and I've come back from that just to participate. 42,000. So we've done this to tens of thousands of people already. We're going to do it to a lot more, and the huge majority are going to regret it. That's what gender ideology is in practice, and it's extraordinarily problematic.
It is. Yeah, and that is exactly right. I mean, well, I want to go back to, you mentioned the gender unicorn, because the gender unicorn diagram, anyone listening can actually just pull this up. It's a perfect distillation of what I'll call the kind of textbook reification of gender ideology. So insofar as it's kind of congealed into a particular thing, it's basically this. It replaces the sexual binary as a biological reality. That is, that human beings have this organization according to gametes and body structures for sexual reproduction. There are two gametes and there's two sexes, right? And we observe that. It replaces that with two other concepts: an internal subjective sense called the gender identity, which is an entirely subjective category. It's like the disembodied psychological self. And then something called sex assigned at birth, which is a social construct. So rather than biological sex, you get gender identity, which is the true self that can be independent and incongruent with the body. And so sex just becomes a social construct, sex assigned at birth. That's how radical it is. But as you sort of summarize, people initially thought the claim was less radical. That of course you're either a boy or a girl in terms of your sex, but then you can have this other thing called gender. That was a kind of transition position. That's not the orthodox position of gender ideology. And if you look at the Genderbread Person version 3.3, you'll see that that's what he was trying to do. He still had the category biological sex, and he identified gender identity with the brain. He got eviscerated by the orthodox gender ideologues for this. He eventually fixed it, but the gender unicorn kind of replaced it. And instead of a brain, you get gender identity, which is a thought bubble of an umbrella or a rainbow, right? So it's this ethereal thought, and you get sex assigned at birth rather than biological sex. That's the full flowering of gender ideology. It's completely deranged, and it's completely contrary to biology and to what every human culture has observed for time immemorial. So that's how fast this is. It really, I mean, culturally, it started in 2015. Shamika, you talked about 2016. It was 2015 when we got Caitlyn Jenner on the cover of a magazine, Glamour Woman of the Year temporarily, a boy looking like a girl on the front of National Geographic. There was a massive media push of these things. It was like everyone got an activation order in 2015 to suddenly, this was going to be the year of the trans. And even speaking of trans is now kind of outdated, because non-binary is a different category than trans. But there's no limiting principle to gender identity, because a gender identity doesn't refer back to sex. Gender identity, if you ask one of these folks that could give us a definition of gender identity, is your internal sense of gender. So the word gender gets used. It's a thing you're defining, and it's in the definition. So the thing is entirely circular.
Right. I remember the little girl too that was on TLC. I thought she was just like this rare thing. I can't remember her name, but they had a whole
Jazz
show on her. Yes.
Jazz.
Becoming Jazz or something it was called. And so I thought this was just something that only happened every now and then, because I'm used to seeing, just thinking about girls that I went to school with that maybe played basketball or just really came across very masculine. I saw them, we called them tomboys,
Right.
and they would grow up and get older, get married or be in relationships with men and be happy, And so it's like we're taking that away from kids to kind of just relax and be who they are and grow into who they may become. Because sometimes you can see a little boy. My cousin, he would go to the next door neighbor's house and play dolls with her in her little kitchen set, and everything. He grew up to have a wife, and now they have 6 kids, and there's nothing feminine about him now. So it's like we're watching these kids and now kind of labeling them and making them make choices that they shouldn't even have to face right now. Just let them grow up, and we aren't doing that.
Yeah, if I could say one thing there, it's important to realize that there's no such thing as a gay kid or a trans kid.
Yeah.
Like when people say that, what they mean is the kid is acting kind of atypically in a way that makes me think that maybe there's a more than 20% or whatever chance, like when that kid grows up, he's going to be homosexual or he might do this. But until someone gets to the point where they reach at least puberty and you know how they feel about the opposite sex. I knew a lot of kind of softer feminine guys growing up who discovered they really liked girls and toughened up a little bit so they could chase girls and compete for women. Until you understand how you feel about the opposite sex, what your sexual tastes are, what your interests are, you have no idea what your sexuality is.
Right.
Like when you say you're a woman, you have no idea. First of all, as a man, you never have any idea what it is to be a woman.
Wow.
You're not giving birth. But I mean, if you're 8, you have no idea about any of that. You have no idea what, I'll keep this PG, a vagina feels like. You have no idea what is associated with this whole other side of life. You've never been on a date. You probably have one female friend in your whole circle. So to say you are female, what you mean is you like pink, literally. You mean that you have some characteristic, like you're a little sensitive as a guy, and you associate that with being female. You can't be a gay kid or a trans kid because you haven't been through puberty. You haven't had sex. You have no idea what being a man or a woman is. Yeah. So I mean, this whole idea is some kind of pedophile stuff.
Oh,
you're
sure.
taking these adult categories like what sexuality is, and you're dumping this on these little 3-foot tall children.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely. And I mean, honestly, so Will, what you said, I mean, you opened that door. So I'm going to walk through it. I've spent 1.5 years reading the literature, going down into the 9th level of hell on this stuff. And I can tell you that is where this is going. I won't say it's only about this, but where all this is going is the destruction of the very idea of an age of consent. Just as there's no, just as the male-female category is permeable, the parent-child, the adult-child categories, and you can see this. You don't have to spend a lot of time on this to see that a lot of this has to do with the kind of liberation of the child for sex. I think that's a lot of what is happening with this kind of related phenomenon of Drag Queen Story Hour. It's about sexualizing children, which is why I'm perfectly fine using the G word on social media. I think
you won't stop you from saying
outraged. I'm just perfectly fine with that because it just captures what's happening. But the other point, Shamika, that you made is that your friends fortunately, when until 20 years ago, if you were a tomboy, you were just a girl that liked kind of typically guy things, or you could be a feminine guy that maybe liked playing with dolls, but you're still a boy.
Right.
Because gender identity is detached from the body, all you have is the stereotypes, because there's nothing else that you can go by. And so if you look at some of these questionnaires online that kids get in elementary school when they're trying to determine their gender identity, these are the questions, right? Would you like dresses? Do you like pink? Do you like blue? Do you like things? Do you like, electronics, right? I mean, they're literally asking about, the kind of, are you typical or atypical with respect to people of your sex? And if you're atypical, it turns out you're the opposite sex, or maybe if it's mixed, you're non-binary. I mean, that's how they do this, because it's not like there's an objective way of detecting this magical gender identity, which I honestly don't even think refers to anything in reality.
Well, my next question, Jay, is simple, but Shamika has something to say, so I'm going to shut up.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, when I was 10 years old, if there was some man asking me if I liked penis or vagina and having to make that choice, my uncles would have beat him to a bloody pulp. Now we think it's okay to actually have these children at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old deciding whether they like penis or vagina. And it pisses me off because that shouldn't even be a question. Are you heterosexual or bisexual? You should be no sexual, because that should not even be a conversation that we are having with kids. So yeah, I definitely feel like it's groomer stuff, because why else would you be asking kids to make a decision when it shouldn't even cross their mind? I mean, of course, you play around, you do something when you're younger, but it's like you shouldn't be thinking on that. And that's what they're kind of making that like a sole focus. You have to think about that in order to decide where you land.
But that was my question, Jay. What she just said, I wanted to know why. Yeah. Why are they doing this? What is their end game? You've been researching it for a year and a half. What's the point? It's got to be more than one thing, multi-layer. I mean, it can't all be the grooming thing. That's got to be part of it. But why? What are they gaining from it?
Well, and I think I really like the way James Lindsay, my friend, describes this, is that, it's actually helpful to think of it in terms of sort of Freemasonry or something, which you have kind of different levels of awareness, right? And so the people on the outside are just people that say, oh, this is just all about helping kids that are struggling, right? That's where most people are. The question is, okay, why are the people in the middle doing this? So why are the billionaires like Jennifer Pritzker funding this? Why are the ideologues and the activists doing this? Well, they're actually fairly explicit. They're critical theorists. They want to destroy the present order. They believe in, a form of it's conflict theory. It's, at a certain level, it's a type of Marxism applied to concepts and to culture rather than to economics. And think of it as a cultural wrecking ball that's designed to queer everything, and queer in this sense being a verb, in which you decenter and you deconstruct all of our categories. And the most basic categories we have would be biological categories that apply to human beings, that are relevant to things like the institution of marriage, reproduction. And so if you want to destroy the present order, there's no better way than to strike right at the foundation. And that's what they're doing. The smart ones, or the philosophical ones, are quite explicit. And so that's why I say in some ways it's so baffling and contradictory that you're tempted. I am a philosopher. I'm tempted to sort of analyze the incoherence. But of course, they're not trying to construct a tight philosophical system. It's just supposed to queer everything, decenter everything, destroy the present order, and they have some kind of vague sense that a revolution will come and they'll get something better with perfect equity. I mean, they're never really specific, but I think that is actually what this is about. It's actually about cultural destabilization. You've got to go after the family. You've got to go after the human person. And that's what they're about. And that's honestly why I'm in this, because I think this is more than just one particular issue or philosophically interesting topic. It's civilizational, and we've got to push back, and we've got to push back vigorously and as seriously as they're pushing in the other direction.
Well, I have another question about that layer you talk about. It's going to play to, at some point, we're going to discuss what you're doing to push back and how you're fighting it. And this may be part of it. So you went to the ninth level of hell, so you've probably seen some ugly stuff, and you can probably give us some great examples of how bad this is, and that's really important. But I always say that in this, the race stuff, the violence, the cultural fight, there's always been radicals, right? So that crazy has always been there. The bigger problem are the what you said when you go to the next level, those who are just buying into it and supporting it for whatever reason. And then the people out on the outside who just think they're doing good and they're trying to be nice. So ignoring the worst of the worst and the people with the bad intentions, why is it that the rest of the layers, the other people, don't see it? It seems so obvious that even for those who are just trying to be kind and make it easier for some people who are different to feel that they belong, they seem to just be, some don't know, but those who do, who speak out about an active, and they're like supporting them, like, yes, I'm an ally. They all got the gay flag and they ally, or they say this kind of thing. How can they not notice things like the fact that you and Will talked about the gender unicorn and the gender the
Gingerbread person.
person. Well, that stuff is in the schools for very young children. You know, I think I talked before in an episode about the books that they wanted my son to read about what was it, Sparkle Boy or whatever the case may be. So they're starting young. But but beyond that, right? The other thing that what strikes me as most weird is that it's not just, you know, like Gay Pride Month. It's not just like, well, I'm gay and I'm happy to be gay and I want to go do my thing, right? You do whatever you want to, don't judge me. It has gotten to the point of this forced joining, this forced bowing down and you know, kind of saying that you're part of, and all this kind of thing. So now we're at the point that two heterosexual men, right, can be in a conversation with no other people around, and they have to affirm, you know, transgenderism, right? They have to say that, well, you know, am I using the right pronouns? Am I doing this? But if the whole point was to make people feel, these people saying, make them feel comfortable, make them feel like they belong. Well, they're not in this conversation, yet we're still crafting conversation. You know, you got places where they want to prosecute people for misgendering people, or they're saying, I sent Shamika and Will a tweet from our good old buddy, Mark Lamont Hill, where he's like, I said what I said before, trans women are women, and I don't know why you all, I don't understand why people have to go to that extent. Right? I like you can be, you know, pro people's individual rights without, you know, feeling the need to beat the drum, to wave the flag, and to shout this out from the mountaintop. But they have to see this. They have to say, well, I'm pro LGBTQ, but I do think that you probably should be reading these books to six-year-olds. Or you think they say, I'm pro LGBTQ, but I don't understand why this straight man is in trouble because he says he doesn't want to date a trans woman. Right? He should be able to date who he wants, but you know, these things have actually happened. It's like they're calling these people transphobes because he says, I don't want to date a trans woman. And that person. So wouldn't these people who are allies look at that and say, well, that's a bridge too far even for me? Why don't they say that?
Because they
I'd say the medicine,
because they're lost in the nonsense of all the semantics here. I mean, trans women are, even if you don't want to say men, they're just biological males. Like no straight man is interested in dating biological men. If once you just remove the blinders, there's not even a debate here.
Right.
No, there's not. What it shows though is the power of a very strong ideological campaign to shape, if not exactly the way people, like if you held a gun to someone's head, I'm not saying do this, but that was saying to trans women or whatever, they would, of course, I know that.
Mark Lamont Hill said, shoot me.
No, he wouldn't.
I don't think trans women are women.
He says it, and he kind of, at one level, he believes it, but he also knows it's not true. It's a level of, humans are able to live with that kind of cognitive dissonance. I really think it's really helpful to read some books about what happened in the former Soviet Union, what happened in the Eastern Bloc countries, in which people had to live these double lives, in which was a kind of official truth and official language, right, that they had to speak, and they get really good at it. We're really sophisticated at doing that kind of thing. So the two guys that aren't even being monitored, right, they're still very careful about how they speak, right? It's like someone might be listening, Big Brother might be listening. And so, but I think this is the clue that what we're dealing with is not a campaign of tolerance. We are dealing with an essentially totalitarian movement. That is what this is. And you can see it. All you have to do is not use the pronouns that they want you to use. Just dissent from that. And you will see that you have to speak something you think is false for purposes of being courteous. But of course, they're asking me to say something that's false. That's not courteous. But it's an absolutely totalitarian movement that wants to control the concepts we use and wants to control the language that we use. That's what makes it totalitarian. And I think the faster people realize that, the faster we get to a point where at least a critical mass of people realizes, okay, this is just awful and diabolical, and we got to do something about it. At the moment, there's too many well-meaning people kind of floating around in the middle.
Shamika, I want to go to you because you are vocally pushing back against this, and I know you get a lot of pushback and you get attacked for it. So talk about some of those things. I know today, I don't know if you got attacked for it, but I saw you talking about apparently it's Women's History Month. Who knew that? And now we're, because of and see, this is another problem of the debate over Black History Month. The other reason I hate it is because of all the other things it spawns. So now people say, why we got to do, I'm not against Black History, but why do we have to give you people a month where we just focus on you? What about everybody else? And so, the crazy people who want to see the end game anyway say, okay, let's celebrate every other month. So now we got to celebrate all the other months we weren't celebrating. So apparently it's Women's History Month. So, which is another odd thing that Mark Lamont Hill decided to tweet that trans women were women, as that's the first thing he thinks of in Women's Month is trans women. But apparently Hershey, was it Hershey? Somebody's got some candy bar, and what was the deal with the candy bar, Shamika?
So in honor of Women's History Month or International Women's Month, whatever it is,
Hershey they made it up
put out this, candy bar, and well, they're just kind of promoting it as she, get your Hershey, but they have
that's clever. Yeah, what's wrong with that?
They have a trans woman in there that sounds like a man, looks like a man, just in a wig. And my whole thing is get your own candy bar, call it him with nuts. Like that is really irritating me that they keep pushing this stuff on us, and it pisses me off when people go along with it, because it's like, if you just keep allowing this mental illness, it's only going to grow. Like in every couple of months, we add an alphabet to the whole LGBTQ plus. No. You're lesbian or you're gay or you're nuts, in my opinion, because I just can't keep doing all of this. And I don't feel like somebody should make me have to acknowledge what they are. I appreciate it when we interview Buck Angel, because there's no problem with Buck saying trans men are trans men.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just what it is. But this whole idea that a trans woman is a woman, no.
And the first woman you go to when you want to promote the woman candy bar, the first woman you go to is because apparently
is the man.
No, we are all wrong. I just thought about this, Shamika. Thank you. No, trans women are not women. You're right about that. Trans women are more women than regular women.
That's what they say.
That's why we go to them first. You need a woman. Well, if we can't get a trans woman, we'll get a regular one. We want a trans woman because they elevate women. Man, trans women do female better than women. I mean, it just is what it is. That's why we go.
Apparently, that's how they end up Woman of the Year.
Right, several times.
I mean, there's a whole Dave Chappelle routine about this, right? Like, none of you bitches in here could win any of these women's awards. Caitlyn Jenner came out 2016 is a better woman than any of you women, and right now the first Black trans woman. But I mean, yeah, just one quick line. But yeah, the first woman that was picked for the she/her candy bar campaign, was well, it's not a woman, but the first person that was picked for the she/her candy bar campaign for Hershey's was a trans identifying male. Right. And I think that it's this weird scene, like Jay described this really well, is like Soviet nomenclatura or whatever the term was, samizdat, where people are like just looking at this and everyone's sort of smiling and nodding, and it's just someone who looks not being cruel, like a guy. And that person is talking about this online. Like, I'm so proud to be the first female face of a major candy company. Like, there's a huge element of funny to this. And by the way, Charles, I just pulled up your thing from Mark Lamont Hill. It's actually not even trans women, it's trans men. Let's see what the brother says
trans
here.
Men are men. I said what I said or something.
But it's a whole thread. It's like all these Black and Jewish men like kind of broing out. And then it gets into this weird place. So like David Goldstein says, look, Mark, I'm not going to go with you all the way here. Men can't get pregnant. Come on. But trans men can, maybe, I think is what you meant. And Mark Lamont Hill is like, no. I said what I said. Trans men are men, and men can get pregnant. And the guys in this thread are just like, why are you doing this? Like, the second guy down is Chuck Reese, Chuck is no conservative. I mean, he's here in a business dude. I think this is Chuck from NBC. I could be wrong, but he's like, that's the comment you respond to? You're corny, son. And so it's just all these guys in this thread. Like, what are you doing? And
he's
Mark
mad.
Hill is just,
I don't know what's wrong with you people. I don't understand why I'm confusing you. I just said a man can have a baby. You keep saying they can't. Yes, a man, if he's trans.
Gay.
Look, you transphobes. Some women have penises. Some men have vaginas. Look, bros. I mean,
And why
it's
is that
just
the hill you want to die on? Even if you believe that, which I think he seems to be, he can't
He's
leave. Don't know if he's
gay.
active.
He's
But
gay.
no, but
And
this is
he
what I'm
should
saying,
just
Shamika.
come out and say it.
But all that aside,
I like it all.
but here's the problem, Shamika. All that aside,
if
let's
you put
assume
a
he's
wildly
whatever.
excited woman in a bed with that dude, he's not going. I mean, it's just like everyone knows what this is. Like everyone knows what sex is. It's just I
But I
don't know.
don't know why he's
I can't play
fighting
along
for it so
personally.
hard. That's what. Even if he
I
believes
can't
that,
either.
if he believes that, and I come to him and come to him and I say I don't believe that, why can't it just be like, okay, you move on? Why is he spending hours trying to convince people that he's right?
Because it's totalitarian.
It's
and
insane.
Totalitarian ideologies. They require these constant doctrinal statements, these constant purity tests, right? That's
Jay is correct here as an intelligent religious man. Like, no, he's saying the Shahada. That's what he's doing. He is showing his commitment. The difference is that unlike, say, Catholicism or one of the world's major militaries, this is a bizarre faith. I don't think there's a point to what he's doing, but it's a faith statement. Do you really believe the dinosaur bones were put there as a tease? Probably not. But you're showing a kind of commitment, and that's what they're doing. And does he believe it by this point? Probably. It doesn't matter.
Shamika made a good point. People give Shamika a hard time for being so blunt and cutting straight through, but she made a point because she mentioned Buck. One other interesting thing that Buck said, though, and Jay, you can speak to this, is that okay, you want to these outer people I talk about. Okay, you want to be nice. Okay, this, that, the other. But Buck made a point that, and I asked him clearly to verify. He said, yes, that's the case. I'm a biological woman. I live as a man because I have gender dysphoria, and to see myself as a woman bothered me. So I live more comfortably seeing a man when I look in the mirror. But I acknowledge that it is a mental disorder. Right. And so that's the piece. One, we won't acknowledge that, which is bad enough because it'd be easier to treat if you really looked at what the problem was. So that's one. But the other piece that's weird is these are the same people you talk about double speak and the Eastern Bloc. These are the same people who say when a black man shoots somebody or when there's crime or homelessness, everything, if it's not racism, most things are racism, right, Will? But if it's not racism, it's mental illness. We just need to fix it with more mental care, we need to focus on mental illness. We need social workers to go out and not police because of the mental illness problem. So you're admitting that there's a massive mental illness problem, right? Yet the people with gender dysphoria aren't suffering from a mental illness. So you're talking about an issue, but then you don't want to say this issue is the real root of the problem because somehow that is putting people down because they have a mental illness, but that's how you help them for one. And you just said that mental illness is bad and we need to address it. It's important and we should all embrace our mental illness and figure out what the problem is. But for this one slice of people, it's not that they have a mental disorder, it's that trans men are men. Oh, should we go ahead?
No, I was just thinking about that Matt Walsh video that he did to Dylan Mulvaney and how people were so upset saying it was too harsh. And I was thinking to myself, this is a man-to-man conversation. Like men went to war with each other. Like, how is this too harsh when this is just a man in a wig?
I never cut you off. I had to cut you off, but it was too harsh. You would be right if it was a man-to-man conversation, but I learned from Malcolm Hill, it wasn't a man-to-man conversation. It was a man-to-woman conversation. You can't talk to a woman like that.
Apparently, because that's why so many people, that's too harsh. So then you're buying into the thought that this boy is actually a girl, because why are you having a problem with a man talking to another man harshly?
Well, the biggest pushback from that was, the trigonometry duo, Francis and Constantine. Their issue was that he couldn't turn people with that. You're not going to win minds. You're speaking to the red meat. But I'm you're not going to turn. But which I understand them. I love Constantine. They're awesome. But my thing is, you're not going to change them anyway, because the people I'm talking about who on the fringes, maybe you can change it. In a minute, Jay's going to talk about what he's going to push back against it. But I'm like, I don't think being nice there. I'm not saying I would have approached it the way Matt did. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying I don't think if he did it nicely, that people would be like, oh, he was right and he was nice about it. So now I'm going to be against the transgender. I don't think that was happening. They've seen the videos. They've seen the TikToks. They've seen the documentaries. They see the books in school. They see what's happening. And that ain't changing them.
Right.
Yeah,
The
also
man is
just
interviewing. The worst thing that happened, I think, in the gender movie, I mean, there's so many outside of the surgeries, of course, but just that shapes the culture was President Biden talking to him. And then when he said, "This is my 17th, was it 213th day living as a woman?" And he said, what did he say? He said, "Oh, God bless you."
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah,
so
I mean, so just like empirically, what with the Matt Walsh is not doing anything successful here. Matt Walsh has the best-selling book and movie related to this topic ever.
I
So I
think they
mean,
were
I
only
think that's
speaking to that video, though. They
yeah,
thought the
but
video
I'm
wasn't
saying like
helpful.
I think that the idea, but the book and the movie are pretty blunt as well. I mean, so I think the idea that he's not that approach doesn't work is just empirically false. But one quick comment, I forget almost whether it's Charles or Jay that said this, but something was just said that's really important, which is like there's no need really to be cruel here. Although I'm much closer to Matt and Shamika's approach than to like the trigonometry approach. But why don't we just be honest here? Like people that are transgender are people that have the mild but real mental condition of gender dysphoria. If you prefer as an adult to present yourself however you want to, it's actually whatever I might think personally, none of my business that you want to do that. That's
Right.
totally cool. There are many high quality surgeons that can help you with that with proper quality. I mean, you're going to have to get some kind of approval. You're going to have to go through a vetting process. But why not just say that as opposed to pretending that someone who has this mental condition actually is a member of the opposite sex?
Right.
Like I don't get that at all.
Can I
I
add
don't
one thing on that,
understand
though,
that.
Will? You're right. One thing I want to add. We're still going to get back to you, Jay. But to that, here's the interesting thing, though. They act as if it's not a mental illness, right? When those who push back against it say they have gender dysphoria, why are you acting like they're crazy? But to get that surgery, you want them to be an adult and all that stuff. You said there's certain channels they have to go through. Isn't part of it a mental test, right? Don't they actually have to see a therapist and get therapy for it before they get the surgery?
Right.
Used to be that way.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows what it's like now, right? But
yeah, but I mean, the reality though is that we can't just say what Will said, right? And the reason is because this is an ideological campaign, which isn't about, okay, how do we help people who are struggling? The other thing is that a lot of people don't know that even the term gender dysphoria is a recent term. If you look at the history of the DSM, it's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is really just the document that psychiatrists and therapists use to code for health insurance so they can get compensated, right? And so it gives names to different kind of conditions. Right. If you had looked prior to 2010 or to even 2013, there's a thing called gender identity disorder. The disorder was that you were confused about your sex. And so that was a disorder because you were mistaken. Right? That got replaced with something called gender dysphoria, which is defined as discomfort with your gender. Right. And so notice that treating that now, before, if you had gender identity disorder, that was a disorder that the way you fix it is by fixing your, aligning your identity with reality. Now the way you fix it is just to relieve discomfort. And so treatment then in that case can be completely different. And so even the kind of medical terms that are being used to describe this actually change over time and are highly filled with ideological meaning. And so you got to sort of track all that to even quite realize what's happening. But the reason we can't say these kinds of moderate things is because it doesn't. Again, it's like, you're not saying the Nicene Creed correctly. And with people like Matt Walsh, I think, look, I don't say things the way that he does, but somebody needs to be pushing the Overton window. And at the very least, we have to be able to speak truthfully. And so we have to push back on that. And that I'm hoping is where that's a breaking point, certainly for people that think that they shouldn't lie. And so, that's, I think, just the reality of it.
So let's talk about your work. I mean, you say you and many other groups are pushing back. Tell us how, the methods, and what people like us who just hear it and say something's not right with that, but we're not part of a think tank, what we could do. And when I get it in my kid's school, I didn't want to spend the whole hour talking about that, but
I can tell you 2023 is the year of the pushback. If you sort of use the World War II metaphor, this is the year of Guadalcanal and Midway. There are 18 pediatric gender medicine bills that are underway and being debated in different states around the country. Some states tried this a couple of years ago. They frankly weren't really framed properly because it's a complicated issue. Got 18 states, 4 now: Utah, South Dakota, and a couple of others, Mississippi, and now Tennessee actually today. So those are the 4, all good bills that handle this properly, prohibit but don't criminalize this stuff, and a bunch of other states that are going to do the same thing. There's states passing laws that define sex precisely, which nobody ever thought to do. But now,
so when you say this thing, you mean the surgeries though, right?
That's the surgery. So I'm just talking about bills on surgery. We also have bills dealing with social transition in schools, right? So the way that this kind of gender affirming care, it's a pipeline that starts with social transitioning in schools, usually behind parents' backs, and it ends in surgery, right? And then you get puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones in the middle. So part of this has to do with healthcare. Part of it has to do with accountability and transparency in schools. So schools aren't doing this stuff behind parents' backs. And so there's a bunch of bills that are doing that. There will be scores and scores of bills that become laws in lots of states around the country. They're going to push back. Every one of these is going to get litigated. Everyone's going to end up in the courts, and there is going to be a battle. It'll end up in the Supreme Court between some stuff the Biden administration is doing and the states are doing. The Biden administration is in the process of redefining sex in federal code to include the category of gender identity.
Oh yeah, the Equality Act. I've talked about it before. Most people don't know about it. And what I love about it is when I mention it to some of my, anti-racist, pro-black people, they don't like it. They think it takes
they don't.
That movie. So we need to find a way for them to understand that.
That's right. So the Equality Act would be the whole enchilada, but they're not waiting for that, right? Because they haven't gotten enough votes to.
They're going to work their way up to it.
And so what they're doing is they're redefining Title IX, which was an amendment to the Civil Rights Act that it's what led to women's sports. This is the 50th anniversary. They're redefining sex in Title IX to include gender identity. That is how then legally that will mean that if a man identifies as a woman at the University of Texas, he has to be able to be on the girls' basketball team. That by law, right? Federal law will require that. At the moment, we're in the middle. That's what the Biden administration is trying to do in Washington.
Wow. That is so much. Anybody want to add anything? Looks like Will, before I ask him about his other thing. Go ahead, Will.
Well, I think Shamika should probably have the last word on this before Jay, for obvious reasons. But I mean, like, the idea of a major country redefining sex is just one of those things that's just absolutely baffling. Again, I have no real hostility toward my gay fellow citizens, but that's almost anti-life, anti-reproduction.
I don't even think the gay people would think this is even in the same ballpark.
I tend to agree with that, but I mean, like, you're starting to see that the West and like our closest Asian allies can't even reproduce at this point. No. Like I was looking at the new Korean data the other day because I'm the kind of fun person that looks at the new Korean data. But I mean, it was just like the reproduction rate, couples of 2 people, average, I think it was 0.58 kids per household, like across a lifetime. So, I mean, we're struggling with the most basic things that humans have managed since we were fighting Neanderthal man. And all of this seems to be a part of it. Like the idea of what is sex, what is a penis, it's insane at a very core level without, again, any hate for anybody. This is all something that late stage empires seem to have dealt with before. So I guess that's my take on the redefinition of sex in the law,
Yeah.
Any final thing from you, Shamika?
No, I was just going to say, when we're talking about what we're doing to kind of combat this, I would say I'm pleading to parents to pay attention, because I think that's where a lot of it has come in. Parents send their kids to school and think they're going to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, and they're actually teaching them something totally different. And so parents have to actually be paying attention. My middle daughter, played basketball in school, and she did come across a lot, like tomboyish. She liked the MC Light of 1990 and, TLC when they wore the baggy clothes. And so I remember she had a lesbian teacher who would always, text her phone, just, oh, I'm here for you if you need anything. Excuse me, ma'am. Hello. Hello, she has a mother. Like,
But
so
you're not gonna help her come out. I'm trying to help her come out.
well, shush. No. And so you have to, as a parent, like I don't play them kind of games. You, as a parent, you have to step in and understand that you're supposed to train a child in the way that they should go. I don't really care how she feel. I understand you may be thinking, I'm around a lot of girls who like girls. I play basketball, whatever. No, you were born a female. And I'm so glad that I actually was paying attention and stepped in when I saw these people trying to rear their little grooming heads, because my daughter then went to college, and within a week or two, it felt like, Mom, can you stop by on your way here and pick me up a few cosmetics? And, that femininity came out after she went to college. So just imagine if I had let those people have their way with her, not paying attention, what could have happened? That also happens when you go to the doctor here at a certain age. It's like 11 or 12. They want the parent to step out. I'm not stepping out, because if anything happens to her, the responsibility is going to fall on me. If she's pregnant, it's going to fall on me. If she's suicidal, anything like that, it's going to fall on me. So guess what? I'm not stepping out so you can ask all these silly questions, because I'm the mom. And thankfully, I have a relationship with my children so that, and it's not fear, it's, respect. They respect that their mom kind of is paying attention to what's going on. So when the doctor then turns to the child and say, do you want your mom to stay here? It's absolutely. I need her to be in here, because we have that type of relationship where they feel comfortable to tell me something, and they feel more comfortable with me than this stranger that's trying to put me out of the room. So I'm pleading with parents to actually be parents, and to not just give your rights and authority over to this person who has decided they don't want to be a parent so that they can spend all of their time indoctrinating your children. No, we're not doing that.
Right. Right. And finally, Jay, I won't read the whole paragraph again, but can you tell us a little bit about your work at the Center for Life, Religion, and Family?
Absolutely. And so, you guys probably may know, Heritage Foundation is a large conservative think tank in Washington, D.C. In fact, we're just kind of across the street from the Capitol and Union Station. Obviously, when it was founded, we're celebrating actually our 50th anniversary this year. In fact, just last week was our 50th anniversary. And of course, when Heritage was founded, we were not dealing with gender ideology because it didn't exist as a public policy issue.
Right.
Suddenly, as a public policy issue, become huge. President Biden, his first week in office, issued first a statement, and then something called the National Plan for Gender Equity and Equality. They just issued their first annual report on this progress. And basically what it does is it says, every federal agency is responsible for integrating gender ideology into the warp and woof of your operations, whether you're the Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, Department of Labor, Department of Interior, seriously. So they have, now I don't think Joe Biden is tracking that. I mean, I don't think he cares much about this, but what this indicates is that his administration has decided that they're going to do the bidding of the most radical activists in the coalition. And I think the average Democratic voter doesn't even really realize that. And so this is, whether you like it or not, a kind of political and a partisan issue. I look forward to the day when it's not. But if you follow these debates at the state or the federal level, at the moment, it's entirely partisan. Now, down on the ground, the sort of coalition that I would say is building in opposition to this is extremely diverse. It's, of course, ethnically diverse. It's religiously diverse. It includes gays and lesbians who, by the way, if you say you're a gay man, that means you're attracted to a biological male, and you're a male, right? So you actually have a dog in the fight. If you're an atheist evolutionary biologist, you believe in biology, right? So you're with us. And so that makes this in some ways different, because the coalition against it is very diverse. But at the moment, you wouldn't know that following the political scene. So I think it's one of the most interesting, but also I think the most volatile and important public policy issues of the 21st century, which is honestly why I got involved in it.
All right. Well, he is Jay Richards, the director of the Richard and Helen DeVos Center for Life, Religion, and Family at the Heritage Foundation. Jay, thank you for joining us.
Great to be with you all.
Country to say, Patriot J, I'm saving the day. Patriot J, I'm saving the day from you commies who lame. No, you can't fuck with me. I got a country to say. God bless the US of A. Land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to say, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the